Hi, boys and girls, it's Mrs. Zinga. This week we've been talking about different communities that people live in. Take a look at the story for this week. What do you think our story is going to be about? Who do you think the people on the front cover are? I wonder why the little girl looks sad. Do you have any predictions of what you think they're holding in their hands? Well, let's listen to the title of the story, The Ugly Vegetables. I wonder why the story is called that. The little girl looks a little bit sad. I wonder if she thinks that the vegetables that she's holding are ugly and why she feels that way. Let's read to find out. The story was written by Grace Lynn. That is the author of the story, the person who wrote all of the words. Let's begin. In the spring, I helped my mother start our garden. We used tall shovels to turn the grass upside down, and I saw pink worms wiggle around. It was hard work. When we stopped to rest, we saw that the neighbors were starting their gardens too. So in the springtime, that is when many people plant their gardens. The girl and her mom are using a big shovel to turn the dirt around for their garden. Hello, Irma, my mother called to Mrs. Crumine. Mrs. Crumine was digging too. She was using a small shovel, one that fit in her hand. Mommy, I asked, why are we using such a big shovel? Mrs. Crumine was using a small one. Well, because our garden needs more digging, she said. I helped my mother plant the seeds and we dragged the hose to the garden. Hi, Linda. Hi, Mickey, I called to the Fitzgeralds. They were sprinkling water on their garden from their green watering cans. Mommy, I asked, why are we using a hose? Linda and Mickey use watering cans. Well, because our garden needs more water. So if we look on this side, we see the big shovel and the little shovel. Those are two different sizes. And on this side, we see the small green watering cans and a really long hose. Now remember, her mom said that their gardens are a little bit different. So they needed more water for their garden and they needed a bigger shovel to turn the dirt. Then my mother drew funny pictures on pieces of paper and I stuck them into the garden. Hello, Roseanne, my mother called across the street to Mrs. Angelhow. Mommy, I asked, why are we sticking these papers in the garden? Mrs. Angelhow has seed packets in her garden. Well, because our garden is going to grow Chinese vegetables, she told me. These are the names of the vegetables in Chinese, so I can tell which plants are growing where. So here are the names that they're putting on theirs to put into their garden. And these are pictures of the seed packets that are going into the other gardens. Very different pictures. One day, I saw our garden growing. Little green stems that looked like grass had popped out from the ground. Our garden's growing, I yelled. Our garden is growing. I rushed over to the neighbor's garden to see if theirs had grown. Their plants looked like little leaves. Mommy, I asked, why do our plants look like grass? The neighbor's plants look very different. Because they're growing flowers, Mommy said. Why can't we grow flowers, I asked. Well, these are better than flowers. What do you think they're growing in their garden? The neighbors are growing flowers. What do you think they're growing in their garden? Let's make a prediction. What do you think it could be? Let's find out. Soon, all the neighbors' gardens were blooming so all the flowers were starting to come up. Up and down the street grew rainbows of flowers. The wind always smelled sweet, and the butterflies and the bees flew everywhere. Everyone's garden was beautiful, except ours. Why do you think she feels that her garden isn't beautiful? Do you think their gardens are the same or different? Why do you think that? Let's see. Our garden was all dark green and ugly. Why didn't we grow flowers? I asked again. These are better than flowers, Mommy said again. I looked, but saw only black, purple, green vines, fuzzy, wrinkled leaves, prickly stems, and a few little yellow flowers. Well, I don't think so, I said. You wait and see, Mama said. Before long, our vegetables grew. Some were big and lumpy. Some were thin and green and covered with bumps. Some were just plain icky yellow. They were ugly vegetables. Sometimes I would go over to the neighbors and look at their pretty gardens. They would show the poppies and the peonies and the petunias to me, and I would feel sad that our garden wasn't as nice. Look at the difference between the two gardens. What is different about them? Take a look. Do you notice anything that might be the same? All right, let's find out what happens next. One day, my mother and I picked the vegetables from the garden, and we filled a whole wheelbarrow full of them, and we wheeled them to the kitchen, and my mother washed them, took a big knife, and she started to chop them. Yow, she said when she cut them. She had to use all her muscles. The vegetables were hard and tough. This is shou huang gua, Mommy said, handing me a bumpy, curled up vegetable. And this one is kind of like a cucumber. She pointed at another vegetable. This is shen zai. And that one's like a green onion. And this one, that's a tung hao. And that's like a leafy lettuce, which is right here. I went outside to play. While I was playing catch with Mickey, a magical aroma, so a smell, filled the air. And I saw the neighbors standing on their porches with their eyes closed, smelling the sky. They took a deep breath, like they were trying to eat the smell. What do you think they're smelling? Look at the neighbors. What do you think they're smelling? Whatever it is smells really good. The wind carried it up and down the street. Even the bees and the butterflies seemed to smell the scent in the breeze. I smelled it too. It made me hungry, and it was coming from my house. Ooh, they're all smelling it. When I followed the smell to my house, my mother was putting a big bowl of soup on the table. The soup was yellow and red and green and pink. This is a special soup, Mommy said, and she smiled. She gave me a small bowl full of it, and I tasted it. It was good. The flavors of the soup seemed to dance in my mouth and laugh all the way down to my stomach. I smiled. Do you like it, Mommy asked me. Oh, I nodded and held out my bowl for some more. It's made from our vegetables, she told me. Wow, so the vegetables that they grew in their garden, they made this soup from. Remember, she thought that those vegetables were ugly. How does she feel about the soup? She thinks it's very tasty. All of a sudden, the doorbell rang, and we ran to open the door. I wonder who's at the door. Who do you think it is? Let's find out. All our neighbors were standing at the door holding flowers in their hands. We noticed you were cooking, Mr. Fitzgerald laughed as he held out his flowers. We thought maybe you might be interested in a trade. Ooh, when you trade something, that means that you give somebody else something in return for something else. So they brought flowers. They wanted to trade the flowers for the good smelling soup. Oh, we laughed too, and my mother gave them each their own bowl of her special soup. My mother told them what each vegetable was and how she grew it in her garden. She gave them the soup recipe and put some soup into jars for them to take home. I ate 5 bowls of soup. It was the best dinner ever. Why do you think she felt that way? That it was the best dinner ever? Well, so they are tasting something that is part of their culture. So the vegetables that they grew in their garden were Chinese vegetables. So it was something that was very special to them, and they made it a part of their community now. The next spring, when my mother was starting her garden, we planted some flowers next to the Chinese vegetables. And all of the neighbors planted some Chinese vegetables next to their flowers. Soon the whole neighborhood was growing Chinese vegetables in their gardens. Up and down the street, little green plants poked out of the ground. Some looked like leaves and some looked like grass. And when the flowers started blooming, you could smell the soup in the air. So look at how their gardens changed. Notice how you see flowers and vegetables in all of their gardens. So let's think to ourselves. At the beginning of the story, the little girl thought that her vegetables were so ugly and she didn't like her mother's vegetables. How did she feel at the end of the story? Talk to your parents. Parents, please jot down all of your child's answers and share them with your child's teacher. All right, I want you to think about this. If you were growing a garden at your house, what would you want to plant in your garden? Would you plant vegetables? What kind of vegetables? Would you plant flowers? What kinds of flowers? What color flowers would you want to have? Would you want both? All right. I hope you enjoyed our story, and I hope you learned a little bit about their community. See you soon.